U.S. President Donald Trump is now acting on his promises to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the United States.
This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit.
Trump went on to say merit-based society. So since his inaugural address, that was just on Monday, Trump has signed an executive order placing all federal DEI staff on paid administrative leave. And across the U.S., large companies, big corporations like Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, McDonald's, and Walmart are all rolling back or have already rolled back their DEI plans. Camille Dundas is a DEI consultant and founder of the Idea Practice, Inc. She's joining us this morning to talk about what's happening in Canada and if this is the beginning of the end of DEI. She's joining us this morning from Whitby. Welcome.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
First of all, when you listen to that clip, and I know you were watching on Monday, when you hear President Trump say things like making a country colorblind and merit-based, what concerns do you have with that?
Well, color blindness is a very misguided and unproductive way of looking at things, Anne-Marie, because a colorblind policy tells people that they're not supposed to notice anyone's race. But meanwhile, in the real world, when people in North America see another person, one of the first things the brain registers is race. And so this can actually lead to a lot of discomfort and confusion for people because you're telling them not to notice something that they absolutely can't help but notice. So why are we pretending that race doesn't impact how we perceive people? Instead, why can't we accept that, yes, okay, we all have some racial biases. We all succumb to stereotypes every now and then. So let's learn together how to mitigate our biases and how to remove them from important decision-making processes like who we hire. But you know what, Anne-Marie? Most people don't want to talk about their racial biases or any kind of biases. No CEO wants to explain why it is that a woman is getting paid less for the same job as a man. No recruiter wants to have to explain why they suddenly ended an interview when they realized the candidate has a disability. No one wants to have to explain these things. They want to just be able to hire whoever makes them comfortable, whoever will ruffle the least feathers. And that person is certainly not always the person with the most merit for the job, which is why this idea of meritocracy is a complete farce. You cannot hire by merit where there is bias. Because, Anne-Marie, if we lived in a meritocracy, we would not need DEI at all. If we had a meritocracy, I assure you, there'd be a whole lot more diversity when you looked across your workplace.
It's an excellent point. I want you, if you can, Camille, to take us through this timeline. When I go back just 5 years ago to 2020, there was a real drive and a push in North America particularly, but really it went around the world to develop and increase DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in companies. So fast forward to 2025. How did DEI in just 5 years become such a polarizing term?
DEI has been around for decades, Anne-Marie, but it's really in the last 5 years have people in advantaged positions really been confronted with their discriminatory behavior. You had the Me Too movement. You had the Black Lives Matter movement, the unmarked graves of Indigenous children at residential schools. We saw powerful people fall from grace in a way we have not seen before. And all of these movements impacted the workplace. And we started seeing people either losing positions of power, losing money or access to money, unless they started to actually address inequality in their workplace. And some of them were really willing to tackle these issues. I've had the pleasure of working with some great CEOs and leaders in Canada and the US for that matter, who genuinely worked towards change, but most were not, Anne-Marie. Most leaders were not willing to relinquish the privilege of operating without anyone watching and saying, hey, those policies are actually unfair. So what do? Well, they have to do something to ensure that they don't lose that power. And one tactic that has been very effective is the DARVO tactic. DARVO stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. And it's a way of turning the tables on someone who is raising an issue, making the victim feel like they are the one at fault. So that's why you'll hear people like Pierre Poilievre saying things like, oh, talking about race is causing more division. And this is reflected in our workplaces where you'll find that Black, Indigenous, and racialized folk, they find very often that they are villainized when they raise a valid issue.
Camille, there's a lot of information, and we're running short of time, but I'm going to make this our last question. There's a lot of misinformation surrounding DEI, and I'll throw out some examples. The idea that it's about filling quotas based on a person's race or gender instead of qualifications, or that DEI makes things harder and is unfair to white people. Why are these assumptions incorrect?
They're incorrect because the data simply does not support them. Look, in 2021, at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, 75% of chief diversity officers were white. If DEI is anti-white, we'd be seeing swarms of racialized employees being advanced and promoted at significantly higher rates than their white counterparts. That's not what we're seeing. Right here in Canada, right now, the Public Service of Canada is facing a class action lawsuit from 40,000 Black Canadians for decades of allegations of racism in the workplace. So it doesn't, I keep hearing people say DEI is about giving racialized people jobs that they didn't earn or that they're not qualified for it. Anne-Marie, I'll ask you. And I'm asking everyone who's watching today, I want you to think back to every job you've had. Name one time you've seen someone who was hired only because of their race and had zero qualifications for the job. If you can tell me that is a real trend happening, I will be the first to stand corrected. It's so easy for us to fall victim to this race war narrative that Black people or Indigenous people, people of color are stealing jobs that they didn't earn. Then we completely overlook that DEI is about so much more than race.
Right.
Quite frankly, DEI benefits white people too.
Camille Dundas, always great to have conversation with you. I want to thank you for having this one with us today.
Thank you.
If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.